First, I'll create a detailed outline for the story based on your requirements. Narrator. Cassandra, 34, wakes up on Sunday at 6 a.m. to find husband Adam missing. Discovers cold, cruel note in refrigerator. Goodbye. Never loved you anyway. Initial shock. Disbelief, heartbreak. Next day, fraud alerts from bank and credit cards. Hint at financial devastation on top of emotional betrayal. Foreshadowing that there's more to the story than abandonment. Call to action. Before I share what happened next in this nightmare drop, a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If you've ever had your trust shattered, hit that subscribe button because this story might just give you some hope. How Cassandra met Adam, charming finance professional 5 years ago. Whirlwind romance and marriage within a year. Initial happiness but gradual changes in Adam's behavior. Adam taking control of finances. He's the expert. Cassandra's career as school counselor. Modest income. Warning signs: missed Adam's secretive phone calls, unexplained absences. Adam's growing criticism of Cassandra's spending habits. Family and friends' subtle concerns about Adam. Cassandra's increasing isolation from support network. Recent tension about moving money to better investments. Day before disappearance. Normal Saturday. Adam seemed fine. Morning discovery of empty bed, initially not concerned. Search through house reveals missing suitcase clothes. Discovery of cruel note in refrigerator. Initial reaction, shock denial, trying to call Adam. Phone going straight to voicemail. No response to texts. Calling Adam's parents, who seem surprised and concerned. Checking joint accounts online. Still accessible, but something seems off. Friend Megan coming over for support. Sleepless night, wondering what happened, blaming herself. Monday morning, fraud alerts from bank app. Logging in to discover accounts drained. Call to bank reveals unauthorized transfers. Credit cards maxed out with strange purchases. Discovery that mortgage payment bounced. Visit to local bank branch. Talk with manager. Learning about suspicious activity over past month. Realization that Adam had been planning this. Filing police report about missing person and potential fraud. First meeting with financial advisor to assess damage. Hiring private investigator recommended by police. Discovery of Adam's secret credit cards in Cassandra's name. Finding hidden storage unit with empty safe. Learning Adam had gambling debts. Interview with Adam's coworkers. He quit job 2 weeks ago. Revelation about Adam's past relationships with similar patterns. Discovery of fake business documents in home office. Meeting with lawyer about identity theft protection. Bank investigation findings. Systematic emptying of accounts. PI's report, Adam spotted at airport with unknown woman. Emotional breakdown after extent of betrayal becomes clear. Financial reality, nearly $200,000 in debt. No savings. Friends and family. Rallying around with support. Moving in temporarily with Megan to save money. Consultation with divorce attorney about options. Call from detective. Adam's trail leads to Caribbean. Moment of realization. I can either stay a victim or fight back. Creating action plan with financial counselor. Support group for fraud victims provides resources. First small victory, successfully disputing fraudulent credit card charges. Learning about financial protection laws. Working with bank fraud department to recover some funds. Identity theft protocols implemented. Meeting with DA about criminal charges against Adam. Networking with other victims who experience similar situations. Taking financial literacy courses. Selling luxury items. Adam bought to pay down debt. Job promotion opportunity at school. Higher salary. International law enforcement getting involved in case. News of Adam's arrest in Barbados for similar fraud, with new victim. 1 year later. Financial situation stabilizing. Court case against Adam, his extradition and conviction. Recovery of some assets through legal proceedings. New apartment, modest but all her own. Strengthened friendships and family connections. Starting side business as financial literacy coach. Dating again. Cautiously but with optimism. Reflection on lessons learned about self-worth, independence. Understanding that Adam's betrayal reflected his issues, not her value. now helping other women recognize financial abuse warning signs, setting healthy boundaries in all relationships, finding unexpected strength through adversity, redefining success on her own terms. Final reflections on healing journey. Plans for the future built on solid foundation of self-reliance. Call to action. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found it helpful and subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's challenges. Remember, even when it feels like your world has ended, you can always find strength you never knew you had. Thank you for listening, and I hope my journey helps you on yours. Now I'll start writing the full 10,000-word story based on this outline. I'm Cassandra, 34 years old, and I never thought I'd be telling this story. It was a Sunday morning when my world collapsed. I woke up at 6 a.m. and reached across the bed, but Adam wasn't there. Strange, since he never got up early on weekends. I checked the house, called his name, but got no answer. Then I found it. A note in the refrigerator, 3 sentences that shattered everything. Goodbye. Never loved you anyway. Don't try to find me. Monday brought another shock. Fraud alerts from our bank app and credit cards started popping up on my phone. One notification after another, like aftershocks following an earthquake. My husband hadn't just abandoned me with a cruel note. He'd taken everything we had and left me drowning in debt. Before I share what happened next in this nightmare drop, a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If you've ever had your trust shattered, hit that subscribe button because this story might just give you some hope. I met Adam Harrington 5 years ago at a charity fundraiser for the elementary school where I work as a counselor. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in my work with children. Adam told me he was a financial advisor with a prestigious firm downtown, helping wealthy clients manage their investments. When he asked for my number, I felt those butterflies you're supposed to feel when something important is happening. Our first date was at an upscale restaurant I could never have afforded on my school counselor's salary. Adam ordered wine without looking at the price, spoke confidently to the sommelier, and made me feel special in ways I hadn't experienced before. By the end of the night, I was already imagining a future with him. "I've never connected with anyone like this," he told me as he walked me to my door. "I feel like I've known you forever." The courtship was a whirlwind. Weekend trips to nearby beaches, surprise gifts delivered to my workplace, and constant attention that made me feel valued and cherished. Within 6 months, he proposed with a diamond ring that made my colleagues gasp. 3 months later, we were married in a ceremony that was smaller than I wanted, but that Adam insisted was elegant and appropriate. Looking back, I can see the warning signs were there from the beginning, but they were subtle, easily explained away by a woman in love. The first shift came after we merged our finances. Adam suggested it made sense for him to handle our money since he was the expert. I agreed, relieved to hand over the responsibility of budgeting and investing. He set up our accounts, arranged automatic transfers for bill payments, and gave me a credit card with a generous limit. "You don't need to worry about any of this," he assured me. "Just let me know if you want to make any large purchases, and I'll make sure the money is there." It felt like a luxury at first, having someone else manage the details I had always found stressful. But gradually, Adam began questioning my spending habits. A new pair of shoes, lunch with colleagues, birthday gifts for my nieces and nephews all became subjects of interrogation. "Do you really need another sweater, Cass?" he'd ask, scrolling through our credit card statement. "You already have a closet full of clothes you never wear." I started hiding small purchases, paying cash when possible to avoid the questioning. It seemed easier than defending myself, especially as Adam's tone grew increasingly condescending. My best friend Megan noticed the change in our dynamic during a dinner party at our house. While helping me in the kitchen, she asked if everything was okay between Adam and me. "Of course," I said quickly. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know. You seem different around him, like you're walking on eggshells or something." I brushed off her concern, blaming work stress for any tension she might have perceived. But her observation lingered in my mind, especially when Adam criticized me for serving the wrong wine with dinner that night after our guests had left. My parents noticed too during their rare visits. My mother pulled me aside during their last stay, her eyes filled with worry. "Sweetheart, are you happy?" she asked quietly while Adam was showing my father his new golf clubs. "You don't seem like yourself anymore." "I'm fine, Mom," I insisted. "Just tired from work. The kids have been especially challenging this year." But the truth was, I was seeing less and less of my family and friends. Adam always had reasons why we couldn't attend gatherings or host visitors. His work was too demanding. He needed quiet weekends to recover from stressful weeks. The house wasn't ready for guests. Gradually, my social circle shrank to occasional lunches with colleagues and phone calls with family members. 3 years into our marriage, Adam received what he called a significant promotion that came with a substantial raise. We moved from our starter home to a luxury townhouse in an exclusive neighborhood. Adam bought a new car, an Audi, that cost more than I made in a year. He upgraded our furniture, installed a home theater system, and talked about vacation properties we might invest in. "We're building real wealth now," he told me proudly. "This is just the beginning." I should have questioned where all this money was coming from. Adam's salary was good, but not enough to support the lifestyle we were suddenly living. When I timidly asked about our finances, he showed me investment statements with impressive returns but brushed off my questions about the details. "This is what I do for a living, Cass," he said dismissively. "Do you really want me to explain complex financial strategies? Just trust that I know what I'm doing." And I did trust him. Completely. Even when he started coming home later and later, even when I found receipts for restaurants I'd never been to, even when he began taking mysterious phone calls in another room, I created explanations that preserved my image of our perfect marriage. He was working hard for our future. The dinners were with clients. The private calls were sensitive financial matters he couldn't discuss openly. About 6 months ago, Adam started talking about moving some of our money to offshore investments with better returns. He needed my signature on several documents which I provided without reading carefully. When I asked for copies, he said he'd file them with our other financial records which he kept in his home office, a room he had started keeping locked because of confidential client information. A month before he disappeared, Adam suggested I give up my job at the school. "You don't need to work anymore," he said over dinner one night. "We're doing well enough that you can pursue whatever interests you volunteer, work hobbies, whatever makes you happy." Something about his insistence made me uncomfortable. I loved my work with the children, the sense of purpose it gave me. "I'm not ready to give it up," I told him. "Maybe in a few years." He didn't push, but I noticed a change in him after that conversation. He became more distant, spent more time in his office, and was increasingly vague about his daily activities. Still, I never imagined he was planning to leave, and I certainly never thought he was capable of the betrayal that was to come. The day before Adam disappeared was an ordinary Saturday. We had breakfast together, ran some errands, and watched a movie in the evening. He seemed relaxed, even affectionate, putting his arm around me on the couch and suggesting we open a bottle of wine. "To us," he said, raising his glass, "and to new beginnings." I had no idea those would be the last words I would hear from the man I had promised to love for the rest of my life. Sunday morning, October 15th. I woke up at 6 a.m., automatically reaching across the bed for Adam. The sheets were cold. I wasn't immediately concerned he occasionally had insomnia and would go downstairs to read or watch TV when he couldn't sleep. I pulled on my robe and went downstairs expecting to find him dozing on the couch or making coffee in the kitchen. The house was eerily quiet. I called his name, checking each room. No response. The garage door was open and Adam's car was gone. Still not unusual, he might have gone for an early breakfast or to pick up something from the store. I sent him a text. "Where'd you go so early? Want me to make breakfast when you get back?" As I waited for his reply, I noticed small things out of place. His keys weren't on the hook by the door. His favorite jacket was missing from the closet. A sense of unease began to creep over me. I went upstairs to our bedroom and opened his closet. Several empty hangers where his suits should have been. The expensive luggage we had bought for our anniversary trip was missing. A cold knot formed in my stomach as I checked his dresser drawers half empty with only items he rarely wore remaining. My hands were shaking as I called his cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called again with the same result. Then I texted, "Adam, you're scaring me. Please call me as soon as you get this." I was pacing the kitchen trying to make sense of what was happening when I opened the refrigerator to get some water. There, magnetized to the freezer door, was a plain white envelope with my name written on it in Adam's neat handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 sentences. "Goodbye. Never loved you anyway. Don't try to find me." The room seemed to spin around me. I had to grab the counter to steady myself, reading the words over and over, unable to process their cruelty. This couldn't be real. There had to be some explanation. Maybe he was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe someone was forcing him to leave. The man who had held me close just last night couldn't have written these words. I called his parents, my voice barely under control. "Martha, it's Cassandra. Is Adam with you?" "No, dear," his mother replied, sounding surprised. "Why would he be here?" He's gone. I woke up and he wasn't here, and his clothes are missing and he left a note." My voice broke. "What kind of note?" The concern in her voice seemed genuine. "It says he's leaving me, that he never loved me." "That doesn't sound like Adam at all," Martha said firmly. "There must be some mistake. Robert," she called to her husband, "Adam's missing and Cassandra says he left her a goodbye note." I heard muffled conversation before Robert came on the line. "Cassandra, we haven't heard from Adam. This is very concerning. Do you think something might have happened to him?" "I don't know," I admitted. "The note seems like it's in his handwriting, but it's so cold, so unlike him. I'm worried." "We'll try calling him," Robert promised, "and we'll head over to your place. It'll take us about 3 hours to drive there. Will you be okay until then?" After hanging up, I tried to think rationally. I checked our joint accounts online. They were still accessible and nothing seemed immediately amiss, though I didn't know exactly what balances to expect. Adam had handled all that. I called Megan, barely able to get the words out through my tears. She arrived 30 minutes later, letting herself in with the spare key she'd had since we moved in. "Oh, Cass," she said, wrapping her arms around me as I sobbed against her shoulder. "Let me see the note." She read it, her expression hardening. "This is bullshit," she said flatly. "Either someone forced him to write this or what?" I pulled back to look at her face. Megan hesitated. "Or he's not the man you thought he was." We spent the day calling hospitals, checking with mutual friends, even driving to his office building, which was closed on Sundays. No one had seen or heard from Adam. By the time his parents arrived in the late afternoon, I was exhausted from crying and sick with worry. Martha and Robert were as baffled as I was. They helped me search the house for any clues to Adam's disappearance, but found nothing beyond the missing clothes and luggage. They stayed the night in our guest room, and I heard them whispering late into the night, their voices tense with concern. I lay awake in our bed, the emptiness beside me a physical ache. Had I missed signs that Adam was unhappy? Was there someone else? How could he go from loving husband to cruel deserter overnight? The questions circled in my mind until dawn, when I finally fell into a fitful sleep. I was awakened by my phone chiming with notifications. Blinking awake, I saw a series of alerts from my banking app and credit card companies. Fraud alerts, suspicious activity detected. Please confirm these transactions. With growing dread, I opened the banking app. Our joint checking account, which should have contained over $10,000, showed a balance of $42.13. The savings account was empty. The investment account I had access to showed a zero balance as well. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely tap the screen to call the bank's fraud department. The representative confirmed my worst fears. "Mrs. Harrington, there have been several large transfers from your accounts over the past 48 hours. The most recent was a wire transfer of $32,500 to an account in the Cayman Islands at 4:17 a.m. this morning. I didn't authorize any transfers. I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the panic rising in my chest. My husband has disappeared, and I think he may have taken our money. I'm very sorry to hear that, ma'am. I'll need to file a fraud report right away. But I should warn you, if these transfers were made by an authorized account holder, using the correct credentials recovering the funds may be challenging. After hanging up with the bank, I checked my credit cards. Both were maxed out with cash advances and purchases made in the past 24 hours. My personal card, which I rarely used, showed charges from airlines, luxury hotels, and high-end retailers I had never visited. Adam's parents found me at the kitchen table staring blankly at my phone. He took everything, I told them, my voice hollow. All our money is gone. Robert's face darkened with anger while Martha sank into a chair, her hand covering her mouth. This can't be right, she whispered. Adam wouldn't do this. But the evidence was becoming undeniable. Their son, my husband, had not only abandoned me but had systematically cleaned out our finances before disappearing. As if to confirm this terrible new reality, I received a call from our mortgage company. The automatic payment had been rejected due to insufficient funds. The first domino was falling, and what I would soon discover was a carefully orchestrated financial disaster. By Monday afternoon, I had spent hours on the phone with various financial institutions, filed a police report about Adam's disappearance and the suspicious account activity, and was sitting across from a bank manager at our local branch trying to make sense of what had happened. Mrs. Harrington, I've reviewed your accounts, and I'm afraid the situation is quite serious, said Mr. Patterson, the manager. He was a kind-faced man in his 50s who had offered me a box of tissues as soon as I sat down. It appears your husband has been moving funds systematically over the past month in amounts small enough not to trigger immediate alerts. He turned his computer monitor so I could see it. These transfers, $10,000 each, went to a private investment account in your husband's name only. From there, the money was wired to various offshore accounts. I stared at the screen, numb with shock. I didn't know about any of these accounts. Unfortunately, that's not uncommon in these situations, Mr. Patterson said gently. As a joint account holder, your husband had every legal right to move the money. What makes this potentially fraudulent is that he appears to have been hiding these actions from you and planning to leave with the funds. How much did he take? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and flat. From the accounts at this bank, approximately $175,000. But you mentioned other accounts at different institutions, so the total may be significantly higher. The room seemed to tilt slightly. That was our life savings money we had been putting away for a future that now would never exist. What about our mortgage, our bills? Your mortgage payment was rejected this morning. I've noted the extenuating circumstances in your file, but you'll need to contact them directly to explain the situation. As for other bills, I'm afraid any automatic payments set up from these accounts will fail due to insufficient funds. I left the bank with a folder full of account statements and transaction histories that Mr. Patterson had printed for me. He had also given me contact information for the bank's fraud department and recommended I consult with an attorney specializing in financial fraud. When I returned home, Adam's parents were packing their bags. We're going to see if we can track him down. Robert explained, his expression grim. We have friends in several cities who might be able to help, and we need to check our own accounts, make sure he hasn't accessed those as well. We'll send money to help with your immediate expenses, Martha added, hugging me tightly. I'm so sorry, Cassandra. I can't understand how Adam could do this to you, to any of us. After they left, I sat in the silent house, the folder of bank statements open before me. Looking at the transaction history with clear eyes, I could see the pattern of withdrawal that had begun almost exactly 1 month ago. Small transfers at first, then increasingly larger amounts as Adam prepared for his departure. My phone rang, displaying the name of a credit card company I didn't recognize. Hello, this is Cassandra Harrington. Mrs. Harrington, this is Sandra from Capital Credit Services. We're calling about unusual activity on your Platinum Rewards card. There have been several large purchases in Miami in the past 24 hours. I don't have a card with your company, I said, confused. The account was opened 6 months ago in your name with Adam Harrington listed as an authorized user. Your social security number and employment information are on the application. A cold wave of realization washed over me. I never opened that account. I've never even heard of your company before today. I see. Sandra's voice turned professional, but sympathetic. In that case, we need to report this as identity theft. The current balance on the account is $27,412. By the end of the day, I had discovered 3 credit cards and 2 personal loans in my name that I had never applied for. Adam had apparently been creating a financial house of cards for months using my identity while keeping me completely in the dark. I called Detective Rivera, who had taken my missing persons report that morning with this new information. "This changes things," he said seriously. "We're no longer looking at a missing persons case, but at financial fraud and identity theft. I'm going to transfer you to our financial crimes unit." That evening, Megan came over with takeout food I couldn't eat and a bottle of wine I desperately needed. As we sat in my kitchen, the kitchen Adam and I had remodeled just last year, I tried to comprehend how thoroughly my life had been destroyed in just 36 hours. "I don't understand," I said, my voice raspy from crying. "How could he do this? Was everything a lie? 5 years of marriage, all the plans we made, the life we built. Was it all just setting me up for this?" Megan reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I don't know, Cass, but we're going to figure this out. Tomorrow we'll find you a good lawyer and a financial advisor. Tonight you're coming to stay with me. You shouldn't be alone right now." As I packed an overnight bag, I noticed Adam's side of the bathroom counter, usually cluttered with his expensive grooming products, was completely clear. He had left nothing behind, not even a toothbrush. It was as if he had erased himself from our home, from our life together, taking everything of value and leaving me with nothing but questions and mounting debt. The next morning, I met with a financial advisor Megan had recommended. Laura Spencer specialized in helping people recover from financial disasters, though she admitted my situation was among the most deliberate she had seen. "Based on these statements and the timing of the accounts opened in your name, it's clear your husband was planning this for at least 6 months, Laura explained, reviewing the documents spread across her desk. "He created a substantial amount of debt in your name while simultaneously draining your legitimate shared assets." "What can I do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of the disaster. "First, we need to stop the bleeding. We'll put a freeze on your credit to prevent any new accounts from being opened. Then we'll dispute the fraudulent accounts and work with the Financial Crimes Unit to document everything for potential prosecution." "And the mortgage, the townhouse." Laura's expression was sympathetic, but realistic. "That's going to be more complicated. Since it's a joint mortgage and the property is in both your names, you're both responsible for the payments. If your husband can't be located, you'll either need to find a way to make the payments yourself or consider selling the property." The reality of my situation was becoming clearer with each conversation. Adam hadn't just broken my heart and abandoned me. He had carefully constructed a financial trap that was now closing around me. I was facing hundreds of thousands in debt, a mortgage I couldn't possibly afford on my counselor's salary, and the devastating knowledge that the man I had loved and trusted had orchestrated all of it. As I left Laura's office with yet another folder of paperwork and a to-do list that seemed impossibly long, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Harrington, this is Tyler Williams from Westlake Storage. I'm calling about Unit 247. The automatic payment was declined, and we need to update your payment information if you want to maintain access to your unit." I stopped walking, confusion momentarily overriding my distress. "I don't have a storage unit." "The contract is in your name, ma'am. It was opened about 8 months ago. Adam Harrington is listed as the secondary contact." Another secret, another lie. "What address is the unit at? I'll come by today." The storage facility was in an industrial area about 20 minutes from our home. I had driven past it many times without ever noticing it. The manager, Tyler, was apologetic about the payment issue, but required me to show ID before he would let me access the unit. "It's company policy," he explained, "especially when there's a payment problem. But since your name is on the contract, you have full access. He led me to a medium-sized unit toward the back of the facility. The lock was a heavy-duty combination model. "Do you have the code?" Tyler asked. "No," I admitted. "My husband handled this." Tyler looked uncomfortable. "I can't give out the code, but since you're the primary account holder, I can have maintenance cut the lock. You'll need to replace it, though." 20 minutes later, I was standing in front of the open storage unit, staring at its contents in disbelief. There wasn't much, some filing cabinets, a small safe, and several expensive-looking suitcases. The safe was open and empty with a keypad on its door, indicating it had once been secured. With Tyler's permission, I began going through the filing cabinets. They contained financial documents I had never seen before, statements from accounts I didn't know existed, property records for a condo in Miami, and most disturbingly, several manila folders with personal information about other women, photographs, addresses, employment details. "Tyler, how often did my husband come here?" I asked, my hands shaking as I held one of these folders. "Pretty regularly, at least once a week. More often in the past month or so. He was just here on Saturday, stayed for about an hour." Saturday, the day before he disappeared. While I was at home believing we were having a normal weekend together, Adam had been here removing whatever had been in the safe, preparing for his disappearance. I took the folders with me, leaving the empty safe and filing cabinets behind. Tyler helped me secure a new lock on the unit so I could return later to remove the remaining items. As I drove back to Megan's apartment where I had spent the night, my mind was racing. Who were these women in the folders? Previous victims, future targets. The photographs showed attractive women in their 30s and 40s, all well-dressed, professional-looking. Women like me. I called Detective Rivera as soon as I got back to Megan's. "I found a storage unit in my name that Adam had been keeping secret," I explained. "There were some concerning documents inside, including information about other women." "This is significant," Rivera said. "Can you bring everything to the station? This could help establish a pattern of behavior that would strengthen the case against your husband." By the time I arrived at the police station, Detective Rivera had been joined by a colleague from the Financial Crimes Unit, Detective Sarah Chen. They examined the folders carefully, taking notes and occasionally exchanging glances. "Mrs. Harrington, based on what we're seeing here, we believe your husband may have done this before," Detective Chen said finally. "These women appear to be what we call targets of opportunity, individuals selected for their financial status and vulnerability to this type of fraud." "You mean I'm not the first?" The thought was somehow both devastating and relieving. I wasn't uniquely gullible. This was something Adam did systematically. "We'll need to contact these women to confirm, but the pattern is consistent with serial financial fraud," Detective Rivera explained. "Individuals who commit this type of crime often have multiple victims over time." "The good news," Detective Chen added, "is that this significantly strengthens your case for identity theft and fraud. It demonstrates that your husband's actions were premeditated and part of a larger criminal enterprise rather than a marital dispute over assets." They asked me dozens of questions about Adam's behavior, our finances, his work, and his past. I realized how little I actually knew about the man I had married. His parents had filled in some background, prestigious college, successful career track, but I had never seen his diplomas, never met former colleagues from his previous jobs, never questioned why he had so few long-term friends. As I answered their questions, a pattern emerged that I had been blind to. Adam isolated his targets, took control of their finances, established credit in their names, and then disappeared with everything he could take, leaving them with mountains of debt and shattered trust. "We'll add this information to the investigation," Detective Rivera assured me. "With your permission, we'd like to send officers to your home to look for additional evidence. It's possible your husband left other clues that could help us track him down." I agreed, though the thought of police officers going through my home, our home, was another surreal aspect of the nightmare my life had become. Before I left the station, Detective Chen gave me a card for a support group. "Financial fraud victims often experience trauma similar to physical assault victims," she explained. "This group helps people cope with both the practical and emotional aspects of recovery." On the back of the card, someone had written a simple message: "You are not alone, and this is not your fault." As I clutched the card, I realized that beneath my shock and grief, another emotion was beginning to surface: anger. Adam had not only betrayed me, he had carefully planned my destruction. And I was beginning to understand that my recovery would require more than just financial reorganization. It would require a strength I wasn't sure I possessed. The next morning, I met with Lisa Bergman, a private investigator recommended by the police department. She specialized in financial fraud cases and had helped track down individuals who disappeared after similar schemes. "Your husband fits a profile we're familiar with," Lisa explained as we sat in her sparse but professional office. "He's what we call a confidence man or romance scammer, but operating at a sophisticated level. He builds long-term relationships with his targets, establishing trust and financial entanglement before disappearing with as much money as he can take." "How do people like this get away with it?" I asked. "Surely there are records trails they leave behind." "They're careful, and they plan meticulously," Lisa said. "They use false identities, offshore accounts, and jurisdictional complications to make themselves hard to find. But they do make mistakes, especially when they're operating on a timeline." "What kind of mistakes?" "Patterns of behavior, overlooked details, connections they maintain. In your husband's case, the storage unit was a significant error. He probably intended to clear it out completely but ran out of time." Lisa took detailed notes as I provided everything I could remember about Adam, his habits, his friends, few as they were places he frequently visited, and any comments he had made about locations he was interested in. "He talked about the Caribbean a lot," I recalled. "Said he'd like to retire to a small island someday. I thought it was just a fantasy, something people say but don't really mean." "That's useful." Lisa nodded. "Many fraudsters hide in plain sight, telling partial truths mixed with their deceptions. The Caribbean has favorable banking laws in many jurisdictions, which makes it attractive for people trying to hide assets." After our meeting, I stopped by my workplace to speak with the principal about taking a leave of absence. The elementary school had been incredibly supportive, but I knew I couldn't focus on helping children with their problems while my own life was in shambles. Principal Watkins was understanding. "Take whatever time you need, Cassandra. Your position will be waiting when you're ready to come back." "Thank you," I said, fighting back tears at this small kindness in the midst of so much betrayal. "I don't know how long this will take to resolve." "Don't worry about that now. Focus on taking care of yourself." When I returned to the townhouse to collect more of my things, police officers were already there, carefully going through Adam's home office. They had obtained a warrant based on the evidence from the storage unit and my formal complaint. Detective Chen met me at the door. "We've found some interesting documents," she said, leading me to the dining room table where several folders were spread out. "Your husband appears to have been operating under multiple identities. We found passports, driver's licenses, and credit cards in 3 different names." I stared at the documents in shock. The photographs were clearly Adam, but the names were unfamiliar: Michael Bennett, Daniel Crawford, and Alexander Wells. "These are professionally made forgeries," Detective Chen explained. "Very high quality. We're running the names through our databases, but it's likely he's used these identities for similar schemes in other states." Another officer emerged from the office with a laptop. "Found this hidden in a compartment under the desk drawer," he reported. "It's password protected, but our tech team should be able to access it." As the officers continued their search, I went upstairs to pack more clothes. Opening the closet we had shared, I was struck again by the empty spaces where Adam's things had been. His expensive suits, custom shoes, and designer accessories all gone. But in a box on the top shelf, I found something he had left behind: a photo album from our wedding. I sat on the edge of the bed, turning the pages slowly. There we were, looking radiantly happy, surrounded by friends and family who had celebrated our union. Had any of it been real? Had he felt anything genuine for me at all? Or had I simply been a convenient target, a naive school counselor with good credit and trusting nature? My phone rang, interrupting my painful reminiscence. It was Lisa Bergman. "Cassandra, I've got some preliminary information you should know. Your husband's company, Harrington Financial Advisors, doesn't actually exist as a registered business entity. The address is a virtual office that forwards mail and provides conference rooms for hourly rental. What? I had visited Adam at his office several times. It had seemed legitimate with a receptionist and meeting rooms. That can't be right. The building is real, and there are actual businesses there, but Harrington Financial isn't one of them. He likely rented space as needed for meetings and used the address for correspondence, but there's no legitimate business registration, no employees, no actual client accounts. The revelation was staggering. Adam's entire professional identity, the foundation of our relationship, was fabricated. The prestigious financial advisor I had married was nothing more than an elaborate fiction. There's more, Lisa continued. I checked with the regulatory authorities. There's no Adam Harrington registered as a financial advisor or investment professional in this state or any neighboring states. Whoever he is, he's not licensed to provide financial advice or manage investments. I thanked Lisa for the information and ended the call feeling as though the floor had dropped out from under me yet again. How had I been so thoroughly deceived? How had I failed to verify even the basic facts about the man I had married? Back downstairs, I shared this new information with Detective Chen. This confirms our suspicions, she said grimly. Your husband was operating a classic long-con fraud scheme. He created a fictional professional identity to gain your trust and access to your finances. But he had business cards, a website, client meetings, I protested, still struggling to accept the extent of the deception. All part of the facade. These individuals invest significantly in creating convincing fronts for their operations. The website was probably registered through offshore servers, the business cards easily printed, and the client meetings either with accomplices or completely fabricated. As the police finished their search collecting evidence that would hopefully help track Adam down, I sat in the kitchen staring at the refrigerator where I had found his goodbye note just 3 days ago. In that short time, my entire understanding of my life and marriage had been completely upended. Detective Chen approached me before leaving. We've got enough evidence to issue an arrest warrant for multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. We'll be working with federal authorities since this appears to cross state lines, possibly international boundaries. Do you think you'll find him? I asked, not sure what answer I was hoping for. Eventually, she said. These types of criminals often repeat their patterns, which makes them predictable. And with modern financial tracking systems and international cooperation, hiding isn't as easy as it used to be. After the police left, I stood in the empty house surrounded by the trappings of a life that had turned out to be largely fictional. The luxury furniture, the expensive appliances, the artwork on the walls, all of it would likely need to be sold to help address the mountain of debt Adam had left behind. My phone chimed with a text from Megan. How are you holding up? Need me to come over? I texted back. Just finishing up. Be at your place soon. Found out more horrible stuff. As I was locking up the house, my phone rang again. This time it was a number with an international country code I didn't recognize. Hello, I answered cautiously. Is this Cassandra Harrington? The woman's voice had a slight accent I couldn't place. Yes, who's this? My name is Sophia Mendez. I'm calling from the Royal Palms Resort in Barbados. I believe you may be looking for Adam Harrington. He checked in with us 3 days ago but has just left, rather suddenly leaving some outstanding charges on his room. My heart raced. Yes, I'm looking for him. Did he say where he was going? No, but he was with a woman who mentioned something about catching a ferry to St. Lucia. I'm calling because the credit card he used has been declined, and when I searched his name online, I found news articles about fraud investigations. I thought you might want to know his whereabouts. I thanked Sophia profusely and immediately called Detective Chen with this new information. She asked for Sophia's contact details and promised to alert authorities in Barbados and St. Lucia. This is a significant lead, she assured me. If he's island hopping in the Caribbean, his options will be limited. Each island is relatively small with controlled points of entry and exit. For the first time since finding Adam's note, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not hope that my marriage could be saved, that illusion had been thoroughly shattered, but hope that Adam might be caught, that there might be some justice, some recovery of the assets he had stolen, some consequence for the devastation he had caused. As I drove to Megan's apartment where I would be staying indefinitely, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could remain paralyzed by shock and betrayal, or I could choose to fight back to reclaim whatever was possible from the wreckage of my life. The choice seemed clear. Adam had taken enough from me. I wasn't going to let him take my future too. The weeks that followed were a blur of meetings with attorneys, financial advisors, police investigators, and identity theft specialists. Each day brought new revelations about the extent of Adam's deception and the financial disaster he had engineered. I sat in my lawyer's office, Susan Reynolds, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who specialized in complex divorce and fraud cases. She had just finished reviewing the latest findings from the financial investigation. Based on what we've uncovered so far, Adam created approximately $280,000 in fraudulent debt in your name. Susan explained, her tone professional but sympathetic. That's in addition to draining your legitimate joint accounts of nearly $200,000. The numbers were so large they seemed almost abstract, disconnected from the reality of my modest counselor's salary and the growing stack of bills on Megan's kitchen counter, where I'd been sorting through my mail. What are my options? I asked the question that had become my mantra in recent weeks. We're pursuing several avenues simultaneously, Susan said. First, we filed for an emergency divorce on grounds of fraud and abandonment. This won't immediately solve the financial issues, but it will legally separate you from any new debts Adam might create. Second, we're working with the credit card companies and lenders to dispute the fraudulent accounts opened in your name. This is a complex process, but the police reports and evidence of Adam's pattern of behavior strengthen our case significantly. And the mortgage, the townhouse. These were the questions that kept me awake at night. The mortgage payment was substantial, far more than I could afford on my own, and the real estate market in our area had softened recently, raising the possibility that the property might be underwater. That's more challenging, Susan admitted. Since both your names are on the mortgage, you're both legally responsible. However, given the circumstances, we may be able to negotiate with the lender for a short sale or some other arrangement. I've seen banks work with fraud victims before, especially in high-profile cases like this one. High-profile was right. Adam's disappearance and the subsequent fraud investigation had become local news, with several articles appearing in the city paper and segments on evening newscasts. The exposure was mortifying, but it had also led to unexpected connections with other victims. 2 women had come forward after seeing the news, both with stories disturbingly similar to mine. One, Jennifer, had been married to Michael Bennett for 3 years before he disappeared with her savings and left her with massive debt. The other, Rachel, had been engaged to Alexander Wells when he vanished just weeks before their wedding, taking the money they had saved for their new home. Meeting with these women had been both heartbreaking and oddly comforting. We formed an impromptu support group, sharing information with the investigators and helping each other navigate the complex process of recovering from financial fraud. He had the same routine with all of us, Jennifer observed during one of our meetings. The charming introduction, the whirlwind romance, the gradual isolation from friends and family. And the same exit strategy, Rachel added bitterly. Clean out the accounts, max out the credit, and vanish without a trace. Though at least you got a note, Cassandra. I just got ghosted. Through these women, I learned more about Adam's, or whatever his real name was, past, and his pattern of operation. Jennifer's relationship with him had ended 2 years before he met me. Rachel's had been even earlier. He moved from city to city, changing identities but keeping the same basic approach. He's what they call a black widow in fraud circles, Lisa Bergman explained when I shared this information with her. Someone who uses romantic relationships specifically for financial exploitation. The fact that he married you indicates he was planning a more substantial score than with some of his previous victims. The investigation continued to gain momentum. Adam's laptop, recovered from his home office, had yielded valuable information despite sophisticated encryption. The forensic tech team had discovered communications with accomplices, details of offshore accounts, and evidence of previous identities even the police hadn't known about. Most significantly, they found photographs of a woman who appeared in multiple images with Adam spanning several years and different locations. She was attractive in her early 30s with dark hair and an enigmatic smile. In some photos, they were dressed formally as if attending business functions. In others, they were in tropical settings, clearly on vacation. We believe this woman may be a long-term accomplice, Detective Chen told me, showing me the photographs. Possibly a romantic partner as well. Does she look familiar to you? I studied the images, feeling a strange detachment. This woman had possibly known about me, about Jennifer and Rachel, about all of Adam's victims. Had she laughed about our gullibility? Had she helped plan our financial destruction? I've never seen her before, I said finally. Adam never mentioned having a female business partner or close friend. We're running facial recognition and checking immigration records. If she traveled with Adam to Barbados, we should be able to identify her. As the criminal investigation progressed, I faced the daily challenge of rebuilding my life from the ground up. The financial devastation Adam had left behind affected every aspect of my existence. My credit was ruined. My bank accounts were empty. The home I had loved was in foreclosure proceedings, despite my attorney's best efforts to negotiate with the lender. I moved from Megan's apartment to a small studio I could afford on my salary, selling most of the furniture and possessions from the townhouse to cover immediate expenses. My parents offered financial help, but their own retirement savings were modest, and I was reluctant to compromise their security. The support group for financial fraud victims became a lifeline. There I met people in various stages of recovery from situations similar to mine. Some were just beginning the process, shell-shocked and overwhelmed as I had been. Others were further along with stories of gradual recovery and rebuilt lives that gave me hope. Marlene, a woman in her 60s who had lost her retirement savings to a scammer posing as an investment advisor, had become something of a mentor to newer members of the group. The hardest part isn't the money, she told me over coffee after one meeting. It's the betrayal of trust, the way it makes you question your own judgment. But you can rebuild from that, just like you can rebuild financially. It just takes time and a willingness to trust again, carefully with open eyes, but still to trust. I wasn't sure I would ever reach that point. The thought of another relationship seemed impossible, a risk I couldn't imagine taking again. But I was beginning to envision a future for myself, one defined by independence and self-reliance, rather than partnership. 6 weeks after Adam's disappearance, I received a call from Detective Chen. "We've got him," she said without preamble. Adam Harrington, or should I say Julian Mercer, was arrested this morning in St. Martin. He was attempting to board a private yacht with the woman we identified as his accomplice, Sofia Velasquez. I sat down, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "You really found him?" International cooperation worked in our favor. The Barbados authorities flagged his passport when he tried to leave St. Lucia, but he slipped away before they could detain him. However, that put all the neighboring islands on alert. When he showed up in St. Martin, they were ready. What happens now? Extradition proceedings have already begun. Given the extent of the fraud and the multiple jurisdictions involved, he's facing serious federal charges. We'll need your continued cooperation as the case proceeds to trial, but the evidence is substantial. He won't be disappearing again anytime soon. After hanging up, I sat in my small apartment absorbing the news. Adam Julian had been caught. There would be consequences for what he had done to me, to Jennifer and Rachel, and likely to others we didn't even know about yet. It didn't immediately fix my financial situation or heal the emotional wounds of his betrayal, but it was a turning point. The man who had destroyed my life would face justice, and I was still standing, diminished but not defeated, rebuilding day by day. That evening, I attended a financial literacy workshop offered through the Victim Support Group. The instructor was a former banker who volunteered his time to help fraud victims understand how to protect themselves in the future and rebuild their credit. As I took notes on secured credit cards, credit freezes, and identity monitoring services, I realized I was absorbing information I had previously delegated entirely to Adam. Knowledge that, had I possessed it earlier, might have helped me recognize the warning signs of his deception. Financial independence isn't just about having your own money, the instructor emphasized. It's about understanding how money works, making informed decisions, and never abdicating that responsibility to someone else, no matter how much you trust them. It was a hard lesson learned at tremendous cost. But as I looked around at the other workshop participants, all at different stages of recovery from similar betrayals, I felt a growing sense of solidarity and determination. We had all been victimized, but we were refusing to remain victims. The road ahead would be long and difficult. The legal proceedings against Adam would likely take months, if not years. The process of disputing fraudulent debts and rebuilding my credit would be similarly protracted. But for the first time since finding that cruel note in my refrigerator, I felt a sense of agency, of forward momentum. Adam had taken my past and compromised my present, but he would not determine my future. That belonged to me alone. 1 year after Adam's disappearance and subsequent arrest, I stood in front of a federal courthouse having just finished my testimony in the case against the man I had once believed was the love of my life. The past 12 months had been a grueling journey of legal proceedings, financial reconstruction, and emotional healing. Adam, whose real name was indeed Julian Mercer, had eventually pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation after the overwhelming evidence made his conviction virtually certain. The plea deal had spared me the ordeal of a lengthy trial, but I had still been required to provide testimony about our relationship and the financial devastation he had caused. Sitting in the witness box, looking at the man I had once shared a bed with, had been surreal. Julian appeared smaller somehow, his charismatic confidence diminished by the prison jumpsuit and the weight of his exposed deceptions. He didn't meet my eyes as I recounted our story, describing the seemingly loving husband who had systematically planned my financial ruin. His attorney had advised him not to look at his victims. I later learned, fearing his notorious charm might turn to visible contempt under pressure. As I left the courthouse, Jennifer and Rachel were waiting for me. They had testified earlier in the week, their stories forming part of the pattern of behavior that had led to Julian's significant sentence, 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole until he had served at least 10. "How are you feeling?" Jennifer asked, linking her arm through mine as we walked down the courthouse steps. "Relieved," I said honestly, "like a chapter is closing." "But not the whole book," Rachel added with a knowing smile. "You've been rebuilding quite impressively from what I hear." She was right. Despite the enormous challenges of the past year, I had managed to create a new life from the ruins of the old one. It hadn't been easy, and there had been many dark days when the task seemed impossible, but incrementally, persistently, I had moved forward. The financial recovery had been the most daunting aspect. Julian had left me with nearly $300,000 in fraudulent debt and a foreclosed home. Through a combination of legal advocacy, victim compensation programs, and dogged persistence, I had managed to get much of the fraudulent debt discharged. My attorney Susan had been instrumental in this process, working tirelessly to document the fraud and negotiate with creditors. "Financial institutions have protocols for identity theft cases," she had explained, "but they don't always apply them unless pushed. Our job is to push." And push we did with increasing success as Julian's case progressed through the legal system. His guilty plea had included an admission of the specific accounts he had fraudulently opened in my name, which significantly streamlined the process of disputing those debts. The townhouse had been lost to foreclosure, but Susan had negotiated a settlement with the mortgage company that released me from further liability, acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances of the case. It was a significant victory in preventing that debt from following me for years to come. Financially, I was starting over almost from scratch, but with a clearer understanding of how to protect myself in the future. I had taken multiple financial literacy courses, opened new accounts with robust security measures, and implemented a careful budget that allowed me to rebuild my savings bit by bit. Professionally, I had not only returned to my job as a school counselor, but had received a promotion to head of the counseling department with a welcome increase in salary. My experience had also led me to develop a side business offering educational workshops on financial safety and fraud prevention, which was gaining traction with community groups and women's organizations. "You've turned poison into medicine," Marlene had commented after attending one of my workshops. "That's the true victory over what he did to you." The emotional recovery had been equally challenging. I had worked with a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma, gradually processing the complex grief of losing not only my marriage but the very identity of the person I had believed I was married to. "It's like a double betrayal," I had explained to my therapist during one particularly difficult session. "He betrayed me with his actions, but he also betrayed the very concept of who he was. I'm not just grieving the end of the relationship, I'm grieving the fact that the relationship I thought I had never actually existed." Through therapy and the continued support of the Fraud Victims Group, I had slowly rebuilt my capacity for trust, not the naive trust I had once given so freely, but a more discerning trust based on verification and healthy boundaries. I had even begun dating again cautiously. Michael was a science teacher at my school, someone I had known professionally for years before we began seeing each other socially. Our relationship was progressing slowly, built on transparency and mutual respect. He had been understanding about my need to move at a measured pace to verify the basic facts of his life to maintain my financial independence. "I can't imagine what you went through," he had said after I finally shared my full story with him, "but I admire how you've handled it. Not everyone would have found the strength to rebuild like you have." As Jennifer, Rachel, and I reached a cafe across from the courthouse, we settled at an outdoor table to decompress after the emotional strain of the legal proceedings. "So what's next for you?" Rachel asked, stirring her iced tea. "Now that the trial phase is essentially over, I'm focusing on the positive," I replied. "The workshop business is growing. I'm thinking about writing a book about financial safety for women based on our experiences and what I've learned." "You should do it," Jennifer encouraged. "Your workshops have already helped so many people. A book could reach even more." "What about you two?" I asked, genuinely curious about their recovery journeys. "I'm almost done with my MBA," Jennifer said with pride. "After everything that happened, I decided I wanted to really understand finance, not just trust others with it. I've got a job lined up with an investment firm that specifically reached out after hearing my story in the news. And I'm getting married," Rachel announced, a tentative smile spreading across her face. "For real this time, to someone who actually is who he says he is. I've checked, thoroughly." We all laughed, the sound carrying across the cafe patio, three women who had been through hell and emerged stronger, more resilient, and unwilling to let one man's betrayal define the rest of their lives. Later that evening, back in my new apartment, a modest but comfortable one-bedroom that was entirely mine, I sat on the balcony reflecting on the journey of the past year. The apartment was in a different part of town from where I had lived with Julian, a conscious choice to create physical distance from those memories. I had furnished it gradually with pieces I truly loved, creating a space that reflected the person I was becoming rather than the life that had been taken from me. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "How did it go today? Want company or space?" His consideration touched me. "Company would be nice," I texted back. "Bring dinner." While waiting for him to arrive, I opened my laptop to review the outline for the book I was considering writing. The working title was "After the Betrayal, a Financial Recovery Guide for Fraud Survivors." It wasn't just about money, though. It was about rebuilding trust in others and in oneself after the foundation of that trust had been thoroughly shattered. I thought about the women I had met in the support group, each with their own story of deception and recovery. Some had been victims of romantic partners like me. Others had been defrauded by business associates, caretakers, even family members. But all shared the common experience of having trusted someone who had deliberately exploited that trust for financial gain. The psychological impact of such betrayal was profound and long-lasting. Many of us had struggled with shame, self-doubt, and a crippling fear of being deceived again. But we had also discovered reserves of strength, resilience, and wisdom that might have remained untapped without the catalyst of crisis. As I typed notes for the chapter on rebuilding financial confidence, I reflected on how far I had come from those first devastating days after Julian's disappearance. I had been utterly shattered, then unable to comprehend the scope of the betrayal or imagine a way forward through the wreckage he had left behind. Now, a year later, I was still dealing with the consequences of his actions. My credit score was slowly recovering, but would take years to fully repair. My savings were modest, my financial goals more conservative than before. I still had moments of doubt, flashes of anger, occasional nightmares about waking up to find everything gone. But I was no longer defined by what had happened to me. I had reclaimed my narrative, transforming from victim to survivor to advocate. The woman who had once blindly trusted a charming fraud now helped others protect themselves from similar deception. The counselor who had failed to recognize the danger signs in her own marriage now had a deeper, more nuanced understanding of betrayal and recovery to share with her students and clients. There was a knock at the door, Michael arriving with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. As I welcomed him in, I was struck by the simple pleasure of having someone trustworthy in my life, someone whose actions consistently matched his words, whose care was genuine rather than calculated. "Tough day?" he asked, setting down the food and giving me a gentle hug. "Yes," I admitted, "but also empowering in a way." I said what needed to be said. I looked him in the face and told the truth about what he did. That matters. As we ate dinner on the balcony, talking about Michael's day at school and my plans for the next workshop, I felt a sense of peace that had been elusive for so long. The betrayal would always be part of my story, but it was no longer the defining chapter. It was merely the difficult passage that had led me to a stronger, wiser version of myself. Julian had taken much from me: money, security, innocence, years of my life, but he had failed in his ultimate goal. He had not broken me. From the cruel note in the refrigerator, to the fraud alerts on my phone, from the depths of despair to the gradual climb toward recovery, I had found a resilience I never knew I possessed. The path forward wasn't perfect or without obstacles. There would still be difficult days, legal loose ends, financial challenges to navigate, but I faced them now with open eyes, clear boundaries, and an unshakable commitment to my own well-being. The woman who had once been just Adam Harrington's wife had discovered she was much more than that. She was Cassandra, survivor, educator, friend, daughter, counselor, writer, and architect of her own future, and no one would ever take that away from her again. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal or unexpected crisis? Share your story of resilience in the comments below. If this journey of recovery resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's challenges. And if you know someone who might be vulnerable to financial deception, share this video. It might just help them recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, even in your darkest moment, you have more strength than you realize.